What is up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. I'm recording this on Monday, June 1st. We are a couple days away from the NBA Finals, so we have a lot to discuss about the conference finals, which wrapped up this past weekend with the Spurs and the Thunder going to a Game 7 on Saturday night. Also, the Knicks and Cavaliers, not quite as thrilling of a series. That was a clean sweep by New York, but we'll talk through that one as well. So I'm going to go through both these two series that wrapped up over the last week, talk about what was the difference, where did the teams that lost in Cleveland and Oklahoma City go next? Do they need to panic? Do they need to make some changes? Should they just run it back? And then at the bottom of the episode, I will touch a little bit on the lottery reform with the new 3-2-1 framework that was approved last week. So we'll just talk through the ramifications of that. With that being said, let's go ahead and get right into it. So I'm going to start off with the Western Conference Finals between the Thunder and Spurs, because this was a pretty damn awesome series. Despite not every game being so close, it was very back and forth. And just a quick recap of the series to start off here. The Spurs obviously win this in a thrilling 7-game series. And this series started off with a bang. Game 1 was somewhat of an instant classic, going to double overtime. It kind of had it all. You know, Wemby had an absolute masterclass, 41 and 24 on 56%. He was dominant defensively as always, very much bothered Shea and kind of set the tone for that matchup for the rest of the series. He hits the logo 3 a la Steph Curry back in the day in 2016. So this was an awesome game. Big contributions from Dylan Harper with 24. It was the game of Alex Caruso's life. 31 points on 8 for 14 from 3. SGA kind of had a stinker. 7 for 23 was a team worst, minus 15. But it looked like the Thunder were going to actually come back and win this. And they were up 3 in overtime with under a minute left before Wemby hits that deep three-pointer to tie it, and then the Spurs kind of took over in double OT. So this was obviously a really important win, considering this went to 7 games, but I do feel like it kind of was a little bit of an arrival game for San Antonio to say, look, like, we are forced to be reckoned with here. I know you're the defending champs, but we came to play. We've got a top 5 superstar in the league as well, despite us being super young. So awesome game 1. The games 2 through 6, not quite as spectacular as game 1. De'Aaron Fox missed game 2 as well as game 1, but OKC bounced back in game 2 with a very good SGA response game, 39 and 4 on 50%. Really good bench contributions, which was a little bit of a theme, at least on the earlier part of the series for OKC. Mitchell at 10, McCain at 12, Caruso 17, Kayson Wallace 12. J-Dub did leave this game early, only played 7 minutes, re-injuring that hamstring. And the story of this one was just turnovers, 21 for the Spurs. That was another 9 in this game for Castle. So he had 20 turnovers through the first 2 games, which is an NBA record for a 2-game span. But the Thunder won this one 122 to 113. Then game 3, shifting over to San Antonio. No J-Dub still in this one. AJ Mitchell started in his place. De'Aaron Fox returned. Spurs get off to an insane start, going up 15-0 to start this game, but OKC immediately punched back, responded with probably their best stretch of the series. They outscored them 58-36 the rest of the first half, built the lead up to as many as 17 points in the second half, which was the 32-point turnaround in this one. SJ did not shoot it super well, but he was absolutely masterful as a playmaker in this one, kind of picked apart the defenses. And this is really the game that made San Antonio stop blitzing Shea so much and doubling him and kind of letting him play one-on-one the rest of the series, just because he was so good making all the right passes in this one. He had 26 and 12 assists. Another big game for the OKC bench, 11 for Wallace, 24 for McCain, who was really big in this series, 15 for Caruso, 18 for Jalen Williams, the other Jalen Williams. And it was kind of a weird, tentative Wemby game. Didn't feel like he was asserting himself going in the paint very much, and just lackadaisical across the board. But Thunder win this one, 123-108. Game 4, another hot start for the Spurs. Jumped out early and really never looked back in this one. Pretty brutal SGA game, 19 points on 6 for 15, 4 turnovers, was a team worst, minus 18. This one, the role players really struggled. McCain was 1 for 10, Wiggins 2 for 11, Jalen Williams 1 for 7, Kason Wallace 2 for 8. They held OKC, the Spurs did, to only 38 points in the first half, 82 points overall. OKC shot only 33% from the field. They only made 6 3-pointers in this game, shot 18% from deep, and it was a dominant Wemby game. 33, 8 points, 5 assists, 3 blocks, hit a half-court shot to end the first half, was a lead on defense as always, shot 50% from the field. So Spurs win this one in a blowout by 21 points. Then game 5, shifting back to OKC. Thunder kind of controlled this one from the second quarter on. SGA was very aggressive early in this one, which led to 16 for 17 from the free throw line for him, finished with 32 and 9, another good assist game for him. Another big Caruso game, 22 points, 4 of 8 from 3. McCain was huge once again with 20 points. And this one was quite a stinker from Wemby this time, weirdly tentative like he was in game 3. He was pretty inconsistent game to game across this series offensively. Only 20 points, only 6 rebounds, only 1 assist, 4 for 15 from the field, 0 of 5 from 3. And the Thunder won this one 127 to 114 and looked like they were in a really good spot. Then going back to San Antonio for game 6, another Spurs blitz to start this game early. I mean, they got off to a lot of really hot starts in this series. The Thunder never led in this game. This was a end-to-end victory for San Antonio. They held the Thunder to, again, 37% from the field, 25% from 3. They really blew this game open in the third quarter when they went on a 20-0 run to push the lead up to 27 points. This was one of Shea's maybe worst games of his career, at least since sort of being in his prime. 15 points, 4 assists, 1 rebound, 6 of 18 shooting, 0 of 5 from 3, only 3 free throw attempts, was a team worst minus 28. And the Spurs won this one 118 to 91, which set the scene for game 7 on Saturday and what we hoped was going to be more competitive than games 2 through 6. Kind of a really good game 1, a solid game 7 sandwiched by these 5 pretty lopsided games across the board. But game 7 did deliver. It was not the classic that game 1 was, but it was very competitive, back and forth. And the Spurs did get, again, off to a hot start in this one. 18-8, they went up to start the game. Felt like they were kind of making everything. OKC looked a little tentative on offense, especially in the half court. But they did eventually claw back to go up 53-49 towards the end of the second quarter, led by Shea, who put on an absolute masterclass in this one. But he just did not get enough help. And the Spurs led for 44 of 48 minutes in this game. Every time the Spurs would cut it down to 3 or 4 points or a 1-possession game, the Spurs would punch back and make a play to push it back up to the 7, 8 to 10 range. The Spurs eventually win this one 111 to 103 and go on to the finals in only Wemby's 3rd season at age 22. And this was the type of series and the type of game in game 7 that felt like a seismic shift in the league, because I think it's been speculated for a while now that Wemby's time was going to come, and it was just a matter of when, not if, and how early that would be. And for the Spurs here, I'll say I picked against them in this series. I picked against them in the previous series. And I thought that the experience factor would play a lot more of a role for them in this postseason than it has so far. But, for them to actually go on to make the finals, it really kind of feels like nothing is off the table for Wemby's career, just given how quickly this happened and the fact that they're already here and they are now the favorites to win the NBA championship. Like I was not prepared to jump Wemby up to the number 1 spot, best player in the world. But if he does pull this off, then it's going to be really hard not to go there or at least consider it. And the main reason, and really reasons 1, 2, and 3 for why they won this series and why they're off to the finals now is Victor Wembanyama and his impact on both ends of the court. Like, he was the best player in this series, in a series that featured Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, who is a now back-to-back MVP, the reigning finals MVP, a guy who averaged 31 points and 7 assists on 55% from the field this season, 39% from 3. As a guard, guards don't just average 30 points on 55%. It just doesn't happen. He was so good this season, and he looked really human in this one, and Wemby was the reason why. I mean, I heard Kevin O'Connor say that Wemby basically turned Shea into DeMar DeRozan, and I'm not going to go that far, but there were some points of this series where it kind of felt like that. Dude was just living in the mid-range, gonna get his points on his volume, but did not feel overly impactful when he did score. And it's all because Wemby took away the paint. Shea lives in the paint, and Wemby, what he does defensively, his just presence changed everything for this OKC offense. It made points extremely hard to come by for them. And this is a team that was dominant offensively in the first two rounds. They were arguably the best offensive team in the postseason heading into this series, at least by the numbers. And they looked completely unguardable against the Lakers and against the Suns, two teams that I thought competed and played decently well given their circumstances, but OKC was just felt like a cheat code. And they had this sort of inevitability about them that I hadn't really felt since, the Warriors back with Kevin Durant. So for the Spurs to come and make them look so uncomfortable, again, it all comes back to Victor and just what he does on the defensive end. Like it's really hard to even articulate it because defensive stats are just a little harder to quantify. But just watching him again, it's not just the blocks, it's not just the lack of frequency of shot attempts in the paint, it's not just the lower field goal percentage the teams shoot at the rim against this team. It's the fear he puts in these guys' eyes. I mean, how many times do we see players drive in and shots they would normally take and feel comfortable with that suddenly see him there and have to kind of dribble back out, and it throws the entire flow of the offense out. It's not just that you're not getting those easy looks. It's that now, now we've got 7 on the shot clock and we have to reset, and there's just not a lot of options to go to at that point. So again, all of this comes back to Wemby. I know that we've got some good defenders on the wing for San Antonio as well, but he's the best defensive player in the world. He's going to continue to be for probably the next decade, assuming he can stay healthy. Like he's just so good on that end. And again, it's hard to even quantify his impact on that end. But he's not too bad in the offensive end either. 27 points a game in this series, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 48% from the field, 40% from 3, 90% from the line, nearly a 50-40-90 series for him with that kind of defensive impact. I mean, there's just no question why there's a lot of people who do consider him the best player in the world at this point. But the crazy thing with Wemby is that he still has a lot of growth left to do offensively. So like he can be really dominant, but I mentioned going through the summary, like game to game, he was inconsistent. He had some games where he was a little too jump shot happy, didn't feel as aggressive as he needed to be getting his looks, and was kind of just throwing shots up rather than actually try to get to his spots and be efficient there. And I think that's really the next step for him offensively. He's not really able to quote unquote get to his spot in the same way that a lot of these top stars are able to. Jokic getting in the post and going to work there, that little floater 6-foot shot that it feels like it goes in every single time. Shea being able to get to the basket or his little sweet spot mid-range jumper, especially on the baseline that he's so deadly with. Luka getting downhill to the basket, his little one leg pullback or a step back three. A lot of the top offensive guys in the league, like the true MVP level guys, what makes them so good is they can get to their spot against anybody no matter what, and they can always fall back on that, and then they execute that shot at a higher level than most. Wemby's really talented, but he still kind of struggles to get to his spots, and I don't even know if he really knows what his spot is at this point. Is the crazy thing. He's just kind of existing out there offensively sometimes, but he's so tall and so skilled that he's still able to average 27 points a game. And a lot of this comes back to the fact that he doesn't really get to the paint as consistently as he needs to. He can be jump shot happy. He doesn't physically impose himself all the time, but the fact that what all I'm saying is true about him right now, and he's still this good, that's what's terrifying for the league, because when he does start to get more of a reliable cadence offensively in terms of getting to his spots and having more go-to moves that he can kind of fall back on regardless of the game situation or who's guarding him, etc. Like it's going to be, a guy's going to be absolutely unstoppable on that end too. And he's already pretty unstoppable there when he's in a groove. So that paired with his defense, I have no question that if he's not already the best player in the world, that he's going to get there as soon as maybe next year. Again, if they don't win the finals, I'm going to have some thinking to do about where I want to rank those sort of top 3 there going into the offseason. If they win the finals, again, it's going to be pretty hard not to have him there. But so I'll leave that conversation for another day, and we'll see how this plays out. But regardless, like, I'd be shocked if within the next year or two, I don't have him as the best player in the world, just because of the area of opportunity for him to refine his offense. And he's still so good there on top of the defensive impact. But the Spurs, obviously Wemby's the main driver here, but they got a lot of really good contributions from their role guys and their shooters, and they were just more consistent than what OKC had on that end of the court. Devin Vassell shot 21 of 53 from three in this series, good for 40%, and made timely shots as well. Julian Champagnie was pretty inconsistent across this series, 32% from three, but absolutely huge for them in game 7. 6 of 10 from deep, 20 points in that one. And again, felt like he did hit some really timely shots. Game 1, he also hit some timely shots in late in that game and in the overtimes as well to help them win that one. And then Stephon Castle was just a regular source of offensive creation that is not something OKC had a lot of outside of Shea. 18, 8, and 5 for Castle, 47% from the field. His jump shot from deep did regress a bit, 23% in this series, after he had been very hot from there over the start of this playoffs and late in the regular season as well. Yes, he can be a little bit out of control sometimes, as told by his 20 turnovers in just the first 2 games, but he's an absolute bulldozer getting downhill to the basket and just regularly getting big buckets for this team when they need it, and put so much rim pressure out there that even when Wemby's playing a little bit more perimeter oriented, you still have that rim pressure from guys like Castle. Dylan Harper, I really can't say enough good things about him as a rookie right now. I mean, what he's been doing at his age is truly absurd. Like, he's going to be a future star in this league. There's a case to be made that as soon as next year, he could be the second best player on this team. I think obviously he's got to get a little bit more consistent, but I have no doubt that if he was on a worse team, he probably could average 18 to 20 points per game, 6, 7, 8 assists or something like that. But he's playing within his role here. He is an elite driver of the basketball, attacks the rim with reckless abandon. His finishing is so polished already at this point, even though he's only a 20-year-old point guard. Despite his size, is very effective playing bully ball and can use his strength to push off bigger guys. His jump shot's still coming along a bit, but like across the board, he's so talented offensively. And I think what impresses me most about him is not just the raw skills, but the poise, the maturity, the feel for the game. Like, he picks his spots in a really advanced way already. Like, there's a reason that rookie guards don't have this kind of impact on deep run playoff teams like this super often. And it's because they're probably kind of trying to figure out where they need to fit in. It would be easy to come in and just start chucking shots up or try to, play hero ball when you're this young and presumably a score first guard in the league right now. But it's like he can totally play off ball. He can have quarters where he's more sitting in the background waiting to pounce. And then it feels like whenever they go through a little bit of some half court lulls, like, that's when he strikes. And he does it in an efficient way. And again, his jump shots are timely. Like, he just brings a little bit of extra oomph and energy to their offense that is, again, timed so perfectly that it just, his ability to pick his spots, like when the leash does get loosened a bit for him and he becomes more of a featured guy, like, I think he's going to be a star in this league. And to me, he's been their X factor. Like, I felt like if he wasn't doing what he's doing, I kind of feel like the Spurs might have been a guy short on offense, just because, Fox has been banged up, and then it's a lot of onus on Castle. Then Wemby's inconsistent games matter a little bit more. And in the half court, there were questions for me with some of the shooting for these guards and the creation around Wembanyama and Fox. But Harper, like, at any given point, they've got 4 legitimate offensive creators now between Harper, Fox, Castle, and Wemby. And so they're not really ever hurting for creation, just because Harper has developed into a pretty reliable guy there. And again, just his ability to pick his spots is so impressive. De'Aaron Fox was not very good in this series, 11 points per game on 37%, 23% from three, but obviously did not appear to be super healthy. Felt like they kind of just turned him into a role player in this series. But I do think the one thing that has been very important for them that he's brought is just reliable ball handling and ball security in general. We saw in games 1 and 2 when he did not play that Castle he's just not a point guard. I said that as when he was coming out as a prospect, like, he was advertised as, he can be the point guard for this team moving forward. Like, he's a very, very good player. and probably a future All-Star, but he's better as an off guard and a guy that can do some creation and ball handling, but you don't need him to do it full time. Whereas Fox is just a steadier presence out there. He's a vet. He's been around the block. He knows at the very least how to take care of the ball, even if the jump shot comes and goes and the burst hasn't quite been where it's been in the past for him. But he was also really important in Game 7, 15 points and 5 assists on 6 to 12 shooting. I thought he hit some timely shots that were right around when OKC was starting to make runs, and he would be there to get a bucket to punch back a little bit and sustain that lead. So across the board, the role guys for the Spurs were just really solid in the series. Not everyone was great every single game, but everyone had big moments. And when one guy maybe had a lesser game, another guy picked it up. And this series and this game, especially, highlighted that I felt like the Spurs had such a uniquely good punchback ability. Like every single time OKC would make a big run or cut the lead down, they did such a good job of weathering the storm and stopping these runs with responses. Like 7-0 run by OKC to cut it to 2, and it felt like every time it'd be like Vassell for 3 in the corner, or Wemby gets a huge block and then they get a transition bucket or something like that. And this really swung Game 1 and Game 7 because they led for the majority of both of these games. Both games, OKC eventually made a run. In Game 7, they were never able to fully take the lead back in the second half, but in Game 1, they did. And both times they responded and pushed that lead back up into the 6, 7, 8 point range. And Game 1 and Game 7 were the swing games. Ultimately, like every other game was pretty much a blowout. So the Spurs had to go 2-0 in those 2 swing games to win this series, and they did exactly that. Bigger picture here, this is a pretty unprecedented run for a team this young with this lack of experience. They made the experience factor just completely irrelevant here. Like I mentioned, I picked against them against the Wolves in round 2. I picked against them against OKC in this series. And honestly, if the Nuggets had beaten the Wolves, I was going to pick the Nuggets over them too. Like I have consistently been doubting them, and it's because I'm a big believer and defender of NBA history. And like there's just not a lot of examples of teams like this coming from, like, they were a bottom 3 team in the West last season. I know they had some injuries late in the year, but like to ascend from that with this young of a group, Wemby 22 years old, Castle 21-year-olds, Harper 20 years old. Their top 7 guys had a combined 7 games of playoff experience coming into this season in their entire career. And it was De'Aaron Fox who played one single postseason before this year with Sacramento. And he lost that series. So not a single one of their top 7 guys had even won a playoff series before. And only one of them have even played a playoff game before. And so to me, I'm just a big believer that, you know, the team's got to take their losses, take their playoff lumps. They'll be better for it in the long run, probably come back next year and be the legitimate contender that I doubted they could be this year. But there obviously always are and will be exceptions to this kind of thing. And it feels like Wemby has kind of made himself one of those exceptions. And I'm certainly not a Wemby doubter or anything like that, but I still didn't think he was exempt from this. But I'm willing to be wrong here. At the end of the day, this type of run comes down to one thing to me, and it's the greatness of Wembanyama. And that is what has exempted them from having to take their playoff losses before they just fully go on this finals run and are now the favorites to win the title. And he is putting himself in complete uncharted territory with some of the all-time greats. If you look at guys to make the finals at age 22 or younger that were all NBA players at that point in their career, this is the list: Magic Johnson, Shaquille O'Neal, Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, LeBron James, Kyrie Irving. But quick caveat on some of those guys: Kyrie had LeBron on his team, so he was the number 2 option. Kobe had Shaq on his team, so he was the number 2 option. Duncan had Robinson on his team. Could argue who the number 1 option there, but Robinson was still pretty damn good at that point and also an all-NBA player. And the Magic had Kareem, who at that point was the best player on their team as well. So it really is just LeBron and Shaq are the 2 like kind of solo acts to accomplish this. And then if we look at just third season or younger to even try to expand that list a little bit, you've got Bill Walton, Larry Bird, Hakeem Olajuwon, Penny Hardaway, and D Wade. Wade and Penny both had Shaq. Shaq's shown up a lot in here, so shout out to Shaq. But so you could take those dudes out because they had the help they needed. But if overall either third season or 22 years old or younger to sort of be the only All NBA level guy as the headliner to make the finals this early in your career, you're looking at LeBron, Shaq, Hakeem, Bird, Walton, and now Victor Wembanyama. And between Shaq, Hakeem, Bird, and LeBron, like that's four of probably the top 10 to 12 players in the history of the league. Bill Walton obviously is not at that level, but we know the story of his career. Injuries kind of killed it there. And he probably was on pace to be good enough if he didn't have those injuries to be kind of in those conversations for those top 15 guys. So to be doing this early, it's only the all-time greats, like only the guys that we look back on history and we're like, that guy is one of the greatest players to ever pick up a basketball. And this is what I'm saying. Like Wemby is already putting himself in these conversations. And when we talk about the true all-time greats, it normally does come faster than you think. You know, even like LeBron in 07 had no business beating that Pistons team with that supporting cast that he had. But it happened, and then suddenly you're like, wow, we got to start taking this seriously. And the pressure was on for him to win the title immediately after that. And that's part of the reason why he left Cleveland is because 08, 09, and 2010, like suddenly they're winning 60-plus games and they're falling short. But the difference for Wemby here is they've got legitimate talent here. Like those LeBron teams, he was carrying them, and they really had, I mean, they would have been, any of those teams would have been some of the worst finals winners that we've had this century, or really even beyond that. But Wemby's got a supporting cast too with this group of guards and the wings that they have. And so like he's got a legit chance to win it. And he could not only have himself on this list of guys that made the finals. Shaq lost that finals. LeBron lost that finals. Hakeem lost that finals. Like if Wemby pulls this off, he's going to be in a very, very exclusive group. And yeah, I just the ceiling on him is still to be determined, and I am so far away from saying like he's going to put himself in the GOAT conversation just because, I mean, look at how incredible LeBron James is and how much he's done and how much he's accomplished, and still a lot of people out there still would not have him as the GOAT. And so it's going to be really hard for him to get there, and he's going to need a lot of accolades and play a really long time. And, you know, with his body type, we'll see how that pans out for his career. But the point is, if he was going to be in that conversation, he's checking a lot of the boxes he would need this early in his career to get there. And so, yeah, the Spurs are here, and it's honestly kind of scary to think about that they already are at this point. So moving to the Thunder side of this, and I'm not going to sit here and act like I don't think that injuries did have something to do with this result. I do not say that at all to take anything away from San Antonio. I think the Spurs are good enough to have beaten the Thunder if they were fully healthy, even with Jada playing and AJ Mitchell playing. But I just call that out to say, like, OKC was certainly a compromised version of themselves, and I think it would be fair for them to kind of take a step back and be like, man, if we were healthy, I feel like we probably could have won this, because this team that has been labeled as so deep and has so many different options and sort of a luxury on this roster almost felt kind of thin by the end of it. I mean, it's not like they had too few guys, but it didn't feel like there was a lot of dudes they could trust across the board. I mean, they were relying on J. Will, the other Jalen Williams, Alex Caruso, Jared McCain in a way that just did not feel sustainable. Like those guys are good in their roles, but all of a sudden, Jared McCain felt like was their second most important offensive player. And Jalen Williams is like, he's like the third big in the rotation, typically like getting spot minutes. And it felt like, man, they really need him out there with his floor spacing and what he can do offensively as a shot maker. And then Caruso obviously played out of his mind a couple of these games offensively in a way that he hasn't really done that all season long. So it just never felt sustainable that those were the guys that they had to rely on after Shea. Like Jared McCain took 28 more field goal attempts than the next non-Shea player in this series. But it didn't feel absurd watching it. It felt like they needed him to shoot more maybe. And like he was inconsistent, 37% from the field, 28% from deep. So the numbers aren't going to look great, but he had some big games, and they don't win some of those games without him and his shooting and his willingness to just jack it up there because again, they just didn't have a lot of other options after Shea. And I kind of feel like people forget how good J-Dub is. Like there was a lot of discourse this year about how Chet's actually better than him, and he can't stay healthy, blah, blah, blah. But I'm like, the dude averaged 24 a game in the finals last year, 5 rebounds, 4 assists, had a 40-point finals game as well. He is the offensive driver for this team when Shea is not on the court, like an elite downhill attacker, monster in transition. Like he proved himself to be a really legitimate number 2 option last season. And so to just fully remove that from this series and from the majority of these games, like they really felt it out there, especially against San Antonio. Like I think obviously they were able to survive no J-Dub against Phoenix and the Lakers. And because of that, I feel like we maybe kind of took him for granted of like, oh, do they even really need J-Dub to make the finals? But I just feel like people are forgetting how important he was. Like they do not even come close to winning the finals last year without him having huge games. Like they would have lost to Indiana if he wasn't as good as he was last year in the finals. And but that was the kind of the narrative for this team a couple years ago when they lost the Mavericks. It was like, can J-Dub be the number 2 guy? Like, do they have the number 2 option that they need? And I thought he proved it last year. And I think I actually think his stock is up from this series, even though he barely played in it, because it really shows they do need him, or at least someone who can replicate what he does, which had been AJ Mitchell, who had just averaged 23 points a game and 6 assists on 56% against the Lakers in round 2. So him being out also pretty significant. Do I think they could have survived without Mitchell if they had J-Dub? Sure. But having both those guys out, it was basically asking Shea to do everything and relying on a lot of role guys that really were underqualified for the role they were asked to play in this series. And this did lead to a lot of inefficiency in Shea's game, which is not something we're accustomed to. That's his superpower, is how efficient he is as a scorer. And what he's been able to do from the field as a guard is genuinely unprecedented for a guy at his position in NBA history. So I do want to shout him out quickly in general, because I thought game 7 was like absolute masterclass from him. Like maybe one of the best games I've ever seen him play. 35 points, 9 assists, 4 rebounds, 12 of 21 shooting. I thought his shot making was insane. Like the difficulty on a lot of these shots, step backs, like deep mid range shots. And he just felt like he was draining all of them. And he did everything he could to will them, I thought. And honestly, like I'm not going to say that this was like a legacy game for Shea coming in, because I mean, he just won the title last year. He's back-to-back MVPs. I mean, he's already accomplished all the things that we would want him to accomplish. So I'm not going to be like, wow, he lost to a young Spurs team. Like, but I will say, if he came out and had a stinker, I might have been thinking about that a little bit in the back of my mind of like, man, like, is Wemby already better than him? And he's only 22 and Shea's supposed to be in his prime. And had people were starting to put him above Jokic as the best player in the world, etc. But I cannot fault him at all for how dominant he was in this game. Like they did not lose because of him. He's honestly the only reason this game was not a blowout, because they just didn't get enough from the guys around him. And the Spurs played really, really well offensively, and like it just hit a lot of shots that the OKC guys just could not replicate outside of Shea. But before game 7, he did look really human. Coming into game 7, 24 points a game, 9 assists, 3 rebounds on 38% from the field, 26% from 3. This is so uncharacteristic for him. And he had games of 7 for 23, 6 for 17, 6 for 15, 7 for 19, 6 for 18. Like, those are just not the kind of shooting performances we see out of a guy like Shea Gilgeous-Alexander very frequently. So for him to have 5 games of 40% shooting or worse in a 7-game series, he only did that 9 total times the entire season. And he did it 5 times in this series. In the regular season, he had 7 total games all year of 7 or less field goals made. And he had 5 of those in this series. So that just shows like how consistently good he had been all year, and how much like him under this microscope with no J-Dub, no Mitchell, Wemby on the back line, like really kind of brought out the worst in him. And again, I'm not even going to sit here and it didn't really feel to me like he had like a terrible series. Like I just felt like it was a really big uphill battle for him. And I kind of feel like he did everything he could. Like could he have been a little bit more efficient? Sure. But it just was so much to ask. And it's not like he was turning the ball over like crazy or getting overly passive. Like he went out swinging. And so hard fought series for him. I'm highlighting these numbers to show like how badly OKC needed another creator to take pressure off him. And also to say like, goddamn, the Spurs defense can just really put guys in hell. And I thought that's really what happened here in terms of Shea. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that just Victor Wembanyama's presence in general, it really skewed his shot diet in a huge way, Shea, in this series. On one of his superpowers is the ability to just live in the paint offensively. He's an elite finisher. He obviously draws a ton of contact. That's much of controversy there. But his mid-range rate at which he took shots there as opposed to in the paint absolutely skyrocketed in this series, and his in the paint shots plummeted quite a bit. So during the regular season, he shot 29% of his shots at the rim, 50% of shots in the mid-range, and 21% of those being long mid-range shots. In this series, that at rim percentage dipped to 16% of his shots at the rim, so 13% less than the regular season. He shot 65% of his shots from the mid-range, so 15% more than he did in the regular season. And then from long mid-range, it spiked from the 21% in the regular season to 35% in this series. So he shifted from a guy that wants to get to the rim but is comfortable in the mid-range to a guy that absolutely lived in the mid-range and got to the rim very sparsely. He took a higher percentage of his shots from three-point range than he did at the rim in this series, which is very uncharacteristic for him. So again, give this all the credit to Wemby. Like his presence is what caused that. And I think a lot of it also is because of just the lack of creation and support around Shea. Like they could just kind of play him straight up knowing that Wemby was back there, and they didn't have anybody else to really need to be scared of that was going to get going around him to make them sort of adjust how they were guarding him there. But I also thought, aside from all of that, Dagnall it was a fine series for him. I don't think he was awful, but like a couple things felt like he was a little stubborn on, like the Lou Dort piece of this. Dort was like virtually unplayable in this series. The Spurs got off to a hot start in what felt like every single game of this series. And no coincidence, Lou Dort was out there for all of those runs. And then typically they would take him out for Wallace or Caruso. And that's when the OKC would start to get a little bit more of a rhythm. And look, Dort just defensively didn't have the same kind of impact that we've seen him have in the past. It's not like he was bad there, but he wasn't special in the way that we've seen him be historically. And then offensively, where he's been passable, I mean, against the Pacers last year, hit some absolutely huge threes in some of those close games to propel them to victory and keep them afloat before the Stars took over late. But he was 5 for 25 from three in this series, 34% from the field, 20% from deep. Like he couldn't hit the side of the rim. And it took until the second half of game 7 for Dagnall to pivot off of him there. But I know he only played 17 minutes a game, so you could argue that Dagnall did kind of move off of him a bit. But I just feel like the terrible starts to every single game just constantly were putting OKC in a hole. And I think that they were just playing catch up too much, and they didn't have the firepower offensively to be able to sustain that kind of uphill battle every single game. And it was amplified by the fact that, like, without the creation, without J-Dub out there, without Mitchell, like, it's a lot easier to just ignore Lou Dort and hyper focus on SGA because Dort wasn't making shots. So, but the elephant in the room that I've not talked about, and is probably one of the largest reasons that OKC was not able to come through in this series, is that Chet Holmgren came up about as small as you possibly could, not only in this series, but in this game. In game 7, he had 4 points, 4 rebounds, 0 assists on 1 for 2 shooting from the field. In the second half, he did not have a single field goal attempt, did not have a single free throw attempt, and he got straight up benched at the end of the game. And honestly, he should have been benched earlier because he was rattled. I mean, there's really no way around it. Wemby looked like he snatched his soul. He was in his head. He looked genuinely scared down the stretch of this game, bobbling every ball that came to him, like not even looking at the rim when he got it. He fell down on like the one time he tried to make something happen in the half court and late in the second half. He had a wide open 3 at one point in the fourth quarter when they were badly needed points, and he passed it up. They end up scoring the possession. So of course you can say, oh, it worked out. But like, if he's not shooting that shot, what shot is he shooting? And it almost felt 2021 Ben Simmons-esque in this one. But funny enough, Simmons actually had 4 field goal attempts in that infamous Game 7. So twice as many as Chet Holmgren had in this game. And all of this is amplified by the fact that J-Dub was out, the fact that A.J. Mitchell was out. They desperately needed him to step up as the number 2 option. Like, it would be one thing if they had all the offensive firepower and he's kind of just like, all right, I'm going to play within my role. But like, dude, you're an all NBA player. You're an all-star this year. You're about to get a raise up to $40+ million per year. Like, you have to at least go out swinging. I'm not asking you to be efficient. I'm not asking you to score 30 points, but like 2 field goal attempts is just totally not acceptable for what they needed out of him. And it wasn't just this game. This whole series, 10.7 points per game, 7.1 rebounds, 1 assist per game. He shot 27% from deep, but it's not even about the percentage. It's the volume. He was 3 for 11 from 3 in this series. Jalen Williams, J-Will, took 17 more threes than him in this series. Caruso took 14 more shots than Chet did. McCain took 42 more shot attempts than Chet Holmgren did in this series. Chet only took 2 more shots than Kason Wallace and Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, he was not only unable to step up into the number 2 role, but he was not even their number 3 option. He was not their number 4 option. Like, he crumbled when they needed him the most in a way that was just really difficult to watch. And again, I said it, not just this game. It's also not just this series. Like, he's had series like this in the past. People forget because they won. But in the finals last year, he was awful offensively. 12 points per game on 39.5% from the field, 16% from deep. He had 4 total assists in 7 games of that series. And now in his playoff career, 15 points a game, only 30% from deep, 67 turnovers to 60 assists, and only 1.3 assists per game. So offensively, he is an absolute zero as a passer, playmaker. People can say he's got a good feel for the game. Well, he might make the easy first read pass, but he's not doing anything beyond that. Like, it's, again, I could maybe forgive him a little bit with the non-scoring if he's like creating advantages off the dribble and then finding open shooters and just being effective as a creator and general playmaker. But he's not doing any of that either. He's just standing out there in the corner and not even looking at the rim. Like, he's supposed to be a floor spacing big, but he doesn't actually space the floor when it matters. He doesn't shoot threes. And when he has in big moments in the playoffs, he hasn't made them either. And so it's like, if you're such a non-threat as a shooter, then like, what is his game offensively then? He's not strong enough to take advantage of mismatches inside. We saw him constantly get bumped even on the defensive end by smaller guys like Champagny and Vassell, and Vassell's out here blocking his shots at the rim as well. He has 0 creation off or any sort of off the dribble ability, and pair that with the lack of aggression or confidence in big moments, and it's just this sad, tall, frail offensive player that is really just out there as a body. And I know this all sounds harsh, but like, I really just want to reiterate how terrible he was in this game offensively, how terrible he was in this series offensively. And it really was sort of a litmus test for me, just in the sense of like, to me, he is not capable of being a reliable, even third option at this point. Like, again, the finals last year, sure, they won, but not because him offensively. Sure, he's great. He was great defensively in that series. He's still a really good defensive player across the board. But I will say, I even feel like he was not as effective defensively in this series. Like, he didn't protect the rim like he did throughout the whole regular season. Again, he was getting bodied by guys in the paint at times. Like, he also just can't guard Wemby, which is a pretty big issue for them. Like, he has to be your 4 in this matchup. So then you have to pair him with the big. And so it was just a really tough look for Chet across the board. And I'm between him and Mobley and Duren, it's having me rethink a little bit some of these guys that we get very enamored with because of their defensive impact or their rebounding or their efficiency in the regular season. And it's like, God, the limelight comes on them and they don't have it offensively. The bag's not there. The confidence isn't there. And it's just like, Chet is still an immensely talented player. He has a skill set that's very unique. His size and his at least ability to shoot when he does shoot it and what he brings as a defensive player. But it's just having me think more and more that him and players like him, like we have calibrated in our brain that he's like a number 3 option that can dabble as a number 2. I think he's more of a number 4 that can dabble as a number 3 if we're being totally honest. And like if you've got the kind of talent OKC has when they were at full strength last year, like sure you can get away with them as your third option, but because you've got a top 2 to 3 player in the world, you've got a very solid number 2 in depth and shooting around them. But lucky he's in this situation because you put him on a lot of teams, and I don't know how pretty it would look offensively. So do I think they need to panic and just auto trade Chet? I wouldn't say that. Like, I'm not going to say they should trade him just to trade him because he was bad. Like, but I will say I think he is less untouchable than he was before this. And in the past, for like a Giannis trade, I would have been like, well, no way I'm trading Chet for Giannis. And I still probably wouldn't just because of the age thing. And because I think Chet and Giannis, like Chet's the exact kind of player you want next to Giannis if you have Giannis on your team. So that's a huge part. I feel like they're a front court match made in heaven pairing. But I'm just saying that I'm at least more open to entertaining the idea of a Chet trade if the trade made sense at some point. But aside from that, where does OKC go from here? Because a month ago, they looked like a juggernaut, a team that was going to roll to the finals, that, we were having discussions in the regular season about if they could break the regular season wins record. They are coming off one of the most dominant seasons in NBA history. J-Dub was out, didn't really matter. AJ Mitchell became a really good player. Kason Wallace took a step up this year. Shea somehow got even better than he was a year ago. Caruso, Hardenstein, like Jalen Williams, Chet, like all these guys, just they're so deep across the board. They add Jared McCain, who, looked really good at times in this postseason. So there's still a lot to be pretty optimistic and happy about for this team. And I do think there is a real argument to be made that if J-Dub is healthy, that they win this series, or even maybe if just AJ Mitchell is fully healthy, that they win it. Because I do think Game 7 was close enough where one of those guys could have swung the game potentially, and then that would have been the series right there. And I kind of think that is the case. If J-Dub was playing, that they probably would have won the series. I just think a little bit more creation would have been a complete difference maker for them. And plus, J-Dub also gives them more lineup versatility with his size. And he was probably the planned defensive assignment for Wemby coming into the series. Obviously, they switched to iHeart, and that was pretty effective. But regardless, having those options is always good. So with that said, like if you do operate under that assumption, I don't think you need to panic, and I feel like you could feel pretty good about running this back. And honestly, normally when teams run it back and you lose this kind of series, I'm kind of like, you guys are getting complacent. Like you got to keep your foot on the gas. Every time you don't get better, there's another team that's going to pass you because it's just the nature of the league today with the parity and all the good young players we have in it. But I do think OKC is the rare exception where I wouldn't necessarily feel that way, because I do think they're good enough to win the title this year. I think they're good enough to win the title next year. And they, at the very least, will probably make some fringe moves. So I'm more talking about bigger moves of kind of moving the core pieces around. So I don't think they need to do anything. But I do think this is a wake-up call in the sense that a lot of dynasty talk with them last year. A lot of this, like, could OKC get 3-4 titles in the next 6-7 years or something like that? And I don't think they're going to run through the league like people necessarily thought they were, because the Spurs are already this good now. They're only getting better. And Wemby is the matchup that they will have to go through basically every single year now. So if Chet can't guard him, that's a problem. If Shea is going to be a complete shell of himself efficiency-wise against Wemby, that's a problem. If they're role players like Lou Dort are not going to be able to hit shots consistently from outside, that's a problem. Like they have some roster inherent things that don't bode super well for them looking at playing Wemby for the foreseeable future in this postseason. So I don't think they need to make some big panic trade move. I also think the whole, well, we don't want to mess up what we have thing, we're kind of past that at this point. They're already kind of going to be in some cap hell very, very soon. And they also have more picks than they're going to be able to make. Like even just this year, they have the 12th and 17th pick. They're not going to be able to roster all those guys and all those picks. So like They are a little bit back against the wall and pressure to make some sort of move, but it just matters how big that move. But I do think you have to be willing to be aggressive and willing to take risks if certain things present themselves. And it doesn't mean you got to move off Chet. It doesn't mean you have to trade for Giannis, like, et cetera. But they do have to be if you can thread that needle that can give you a leg up, then you have to look to explore it much more so than last year, where I felt like they could just do a complete clean run back of the team. But if they were going to make some sort of move, I'll just talk through maybe some potential options here. I mean, Giannis, I would be pretty surprised if they went this route, but I will say, I think it's at least a discussion now because they have the assets to get it done. I personally would not want to make the deal if I had to move Chet or J-Dub. I'd rather pair him with those two and Shea, sort of a quote unquote big four. You still have plenty of like low salary bench guys you could roll out and have a pretty deep team, which most times when you're making that kind of deal, teams do not have that luxury, but they would. But just given the age, and like I said, like if you trade J-Dub, then suddenly I don't feel super great about the ball handling and creation around Shea outside of just Giannis. If they trade Chet, then suddenly, well, Hartenstein and Giannis aren't the absolute best fit because they're both kind of going to be living in the pain, and Chet is the ideal fit next to Wemby. So I want to pair him with those guys if I'm going to make that happen. But they could make it work between a combination of Hartenstein, Wallace, Dort, Mitchell, and then however many firsts or picks that are needed. Like they can get their salary wise and they could probably get their asset wise as well. And again, I don't think they're going to go for Giannis, but he would kind of be the perfect guy to guard Wemby because he's massive, but also super versatile. And sure, he's going to keep Wemby in the paint a little bit like another traditional big would, but he's Giannis. He's the best paint scorer of the last 15 years in the NBA. So like that's something that I'm willing to live with there. Not sure how much I love the Shea Giannis fit, but I think that's a problem to worry about later just because I feel like Giannis has been a little reluctant with some of these more ball dominant guards like we saw with Dame. Shea also wants to be in the paint more. Shea wants to live in the mid range a little bit more. So the spacing could be not totally ideal, but I think that that's a pretty good problem to have if you were them. But lesser option, but still would be pretty pricey. Trey Murphy, I think you could overpay with a Bridges or Bane picks type package. I would personally love this fit. I think it gives them J-Dub insurance. I think it gives them more shooting, which they proved in this series that they badly, badly need. And Murphy's not the creator or second option that J-Dub is, but he's a hell of a better option than Chet is as the third option, for example. So you do kind of slide Chet down into that Swiss Army knife, do it all role player rather than like we need you as our third option and to score 20 plus like occasionally when one of our other guys doesn't have a type player. So the secondary creation from Murphy, the shooting, he's also 6'8", so has a lot of size and does play defense. So I think he'd fit in really well for this team. He'd kind of almost be a luxury, but like, God, that would be quite the impressive lineup with those four guys. And then probably you'd still have Hartenstein at the 5, but you could slide in any of the role guys between Caruso or Wallace or whoever next to them, maybe even Mitchell. You want to go super heavy offensive focused. And like Murphy would have been great for them this series. Another option that's been thrown around by multiple sources at this point is a trade up for Cam Boozer, which I love this fit for them. I think he's another really good fit next to Chet. And I think he brings a lot of what they would want between just his playmaking offensively. He can shoot it from deep. He's obviously super young, going to be super cheap salary-wise. He's a good rebounder. He's at worst an average level defender, and he can create quite a bit offensively as well. So, like, I think Boozer's a super high floor prospect that, like, if you could make a perfect fit team for him, like OKC might be up there for me because they're going to appreciate what he does with all his intangibles and the winning pedigree that he has. If he goes to one of these other top teams, they're expecting him to be this all NBA like savior of the franchise. He can just fit in here and be like an absolute dominant elite level role player. Like, I do love this fit, but I have questions about the costs for this type of deal. Don't know if I would want to trade J-Dub or Chet for this. I know you get a lot cheaper and save money, so it's kind of two birds with one stone. But like, to me, that's at best a lateral move. Just because, like, if I'm adding him, I want to add him while he's cheap to my expensive guys, not have to like get rid of an expensive guy for him. And I don't know if it's worth it at this point to give up one of those guys. If you could make a deal with just picks and Mitchell or Wallace, for example, I personally would do it. But if I'm Memphis or Chicago, like, I don't know. I would need like 6 picks to really think about that. And I just feel like that's too much for a guy that at the end of the day, like, any guy in the draft is a dart at the dartboard. Like, we don't know for certain how good he's going to be. And so even if he ends up being good but not great, that could look like a really bad move in retrospect. So outside of that, I mean, I'm sure there are some guys they could add. KD low-key would be a really good fit for what they need, but I don't see that happening, obviously, just because I don't know if why the Rockets want to move off him at this point. But they have the assets to basically pull off anything. So we'll see if they make a move there. But I'll also call out that they are about to be in second apron hell. So some moves are going to come regardless. Jada and Chet, both their extensions kick in, so they'll be $41 million a piece next year. Shea's at $40 million this year, but bumps up to $60 the following year. Kason Wallace is extension eligible. They've got team options for Dort at $18 million, Hartenstein at $29 million, Kenrich Williams at $7 million, and they project to be $28 million above the second apron as it currently stands. So that's before they add anybody, before they make any moves. Like, they are deep in the second apron. So maybe try to decline Hartenstein and get him back for cheaper annually for a longer deal. I don't know if he'd want to do that. I don't know why. He's still only 28. Maybe they decline Dort or try to trade Dort with picks to get someone else who's cheaper and younger. Maybe they decline Kenrich Williams. Maybe they do move Chet or something like that. I don't know. But a move is going to be made, just because I don't think maybe they'll stay in the second apron, but not that far into it. Because the longer you wait with that, like, again, SGA's extension gives them a $20 million raise next year too. So it just gets harder and harder as time goes on. But overall, I wouldn't panic if I was the Thunder. I still think they're as well positioned as anyone, including the Spurs. I mean, if neither team makes any big addition, I could see them playing next year and the Thunder winning. So I'm not like gonna freak out or anything like that, but I do think that they've got to be smart with their next move, whatever it is, in a way that, like, they've got these assets. There's an opportunity for them to get better without totally shaking the boat. And of course, you got to trust Sam Presti over anyone else. Moving over to the Eastern Conference now, where we had the Knicks and the Cavaliers face off in the Eastern Conference Finals, and the series was a lot less competitive. Clean sweep for the Knicks in this one, and I really thought this was won, or should I say lost, for the Cavs in game one of this series, because it looked like Cleveland was going to make this a competitive series. They led the Knicks 93-71, a 22-point lead at the 7-minute and 40-second mark of the fourth quarter in game one. The Knicks proceed to go on a 30-8 run to end the fourth quarter. 15 of those points scored by Brunson on 7 of 9 shooting in that span. And they were attacking switches onto Harden for what felt like all 7 of Brunson's field goal attempts. I don't know if that's necessarily true, but it sure as hell felt like that. And this run continued into overtime after Shamet hit a big 3 to tie it late, outscored them 14-3 in overtime. So in total, it was a 44-11 run. And in the fourth quarter and overtime, the Cavaliers collectively shot 6 for 24. Mitchell was 1 for 6 in that span. Harden was 1 for 7. Mobley was 1 for 6. They were combined 3 of 19. Those top 3 guys for the Cavs in that span. And the Knicks run in the fourth quarter, which they started the fourth quarter 1 for 8 from the field, actually. But from that point on, after that 1 for 8 start, they finished 15 for 20 from the 7:40 mark in the fourth quarter on, including 6 of 8 from 3. They were 12 of 14 to end the fourth quarter of this game. 5 of 6 from 3 in that span. They went 3 of 6 in overtime. Brunson was 7 for 8 from the field in that span to end the quarter. 8 for 10 if you include overtime. And at one point, they scored on 15 of 16 possessions, including 10 straight possessions that they scored down the stretch of that fourth quarter, pretty much almost exclusively going at James Harden. And it felt like the Cavs, if they had any chance in this series, it was just poof, gone after that game. We see this a lot where these teams come in and the underdog is fighting hard in this game one. And I've heard some people say like, oh, well, it's going to be even more competitive now. Look, it was closer than we thought. And I tend to lean the other way. If you don't win that game, it feels like Bill Simmons says this, but it feels like you've got to win 5 out of 7 instead of 4 out of 7, because it feels like that was the one you had to have. That was the game that was, 1, going to put you on the board, but 2, give you the confidence you can beat this team. Like, I'm sure they felt even worse about their chances after this game, even though they played a really good 3.5 quarters to start it and should have won this game, but they just absolutely crumbled down the stretch, and they really couldn't recover because game 2 comes around and they're implementing the strategy that a lot of teams do, just basically leaving Josh Hart wide open, daring him to beat them. And he absolutely did beat them. It looked like he was maybe not going to be playable after game 1. He was a team worst minus 23 in game 1, and they won that game by double digits. Proceeded to be left open and went 5 for 11 from 3 in game 2, scored 27.7 assists. And the Knicks cruised in the quote-unquote Josh Hart game, 109-93 in that one. Game 3, the Cavs kept within striking distance for most of the game, but the Knicks pulled away late. It was an end-to-end victory for New York, 121-108. Cavs did not lead for a single second of that one. And then game 4 kind of already felt like it was over anyway, but it was just another kill shot by the Knicks, as they've been doing all postseason. They go on a 20-0 run to end the first quarter into the second quarter. Absolutely embarrassed Cleveland on their home court, led by as many as 40 points in this one. And they won it 130-93, which is their 5th win of the postseason by 29 or more points. So the Knicks, they're on a heater of historical proportions right now. I mean, in the postseason, they're a plus 20.1 net rating. That is the best of all time by a pretty sizable margin. The second place all time is plus 16. That was the 56 Lakers. There's only one other team with a plus 15 or higher. So like they are lapping the field in terms of best postseason dominant performances all time to this point. They're first in offensive rating. They're first in defensive rating. They are a plus 19.4 margin of victory, which is also best all time. Also, second place team is that 56 Lakers team at 18.7. And again, there's only one other team with 15 plus in terms of margin of victory. So they're blowing teams out. People have lauded at the fact that the Knicks haven't had the hardest path and the teams they've played aren't that good, which I could get behind that in some scenarios, but sure, I don't really care if they're not that good because they're demolishing these teams. So it's not like they're squeaking by. It's like they're making light work of light competition, which is what a really good team should be doing. So I personally don't really care about that whole aspect of it, but they've got 5 wins by 29 or more points. They won game 6 versus the Hawks by 51 points. They were up 72-22 in that game. That was the most absurd blowout I've probably ever seen in my life. Game 1 against the Sixers, they win by 39. Game 4 against the Cavs by 37. Game 4 against the Sixers by 30. Game 5 against the Hawks by 29. In this series alone, against the Cavs, they were a plus 19.5, 121 offensive rating, 101 defensive rating. Shooting-wise, offensively, as a team in this series, 51% from the field, 38% from 3, 61% true shooting. They averaged 28 assists per game, which would rank first in the regular season, first in the postseason. And overall for the playoffs, they're 52% from the field, 40% from 3. They're first in field goal percentage, first in three-point percentage, and they're 76% from the free throw line, and that's with Mitchell Robinson being 13 for 43 in the series. So carrying that number down quite a bit. They're first in the playoffs in true shooting percentage at 62%. They're first in the playoffs in assists per game at 27 per game. And so the run the Knicks are on right now is, again, up there with anybody. I know I'll give the small caveat that, like, when I say the best net ratings for a postseason all time, that includes the finals for a lot of these teams. So I would not be surprised if these numbers took a hit once we get to the finals and the Knicks play the Spurs, who are by far the best team that they will have faced in this postseason. However, it does not take away from just how impressive they've been. They've only lost twice, and they were both 1-point games and what felt like very fluky losses at the time too. So, and they've more than made up for it with all the blowouts that they've had. So just this team is playing as well as anybody in the league, even with the Spurs and Thunder rock fight. And, you know, they've played well enough to the point where, even as a guy who picked the Knicks to make the finals, I don't think you could have sold me on a scenario where I thought the Knicks would have a chance to win the finals, though. I thought they would get there, and I thought that they would play either Denver, the Thunder, San Antonio, whoever. Like, I thought they were playing for second place, and they were going to get beaten pretty easily. But they played so well that they've completely changed my perspective on it. And I actually think they have like a chance to win now. And I think this should be a good series. So that just tells you to take me from, I thought they had no chance, from a guy who already picked them. So it's not like it's a surprise to me that they made it, to wow, I think they have a real shot. Like it tells you how well they played. But in this series specifically, I thought it boiled down to a few things. I think one was the turnovers and transition play. Cleveland has been really sloppy with the ball all postseason. They averaged 17.3 turnovers per game in this series. And it's not just that they turned it over, but it's the types of turnovers they have. It just felt like an instant layup every single time. Like the lazy, prototypical James Harden lose the ball, don't get back on defense type turnovers that are always like at the top of the key. So nobody can really make their way back anyway. And the Knicks actually had a 182 offensive rating off of steals in transition in this series. So nearly scoring 2 points per possession based on that. Like it was basically an instant basket every single time they turned it over. So it was a huge uphill battle for Cleveland from that perspective. Another big thing that I think absolutely decided this series was the major coaching discrepancy between the two teams in this one. I want to give a lot of credit to Mike Brown because I think that he has been absolutely spectacular. He's been coaching his ass off in this postseason. And honestly, like, I don't think it's being talked about enough, like how he has these guys playing and what he's just brought to this team. It's such a contrast in style from what we've seen in the past from them. Like, one of the biggest downfalls for New York was their heavy reliance on Jalen Brunson, too much isolation ball, not getting everybody else involved, and predictability offensively. They are no longer using that as the formula, but instead as a tool. And game one was a perfect example of this because, look, Kenny Atkinson was just decided that he was going to let James Harden take that matchup off the switch. They did not send to it and basically at any point. And look, if you're Mike Brown, like you got to take advantage of that. Like that was what was working. He was malleable to say, all right, like if they're going to guard us like that, I'm sorry, Brunson. Like you're going to have to just go cook this guy and get a basket for us. And I thought it was a great quote from Mike Brown after game one. He said, quote, "We try not to play that game much, but we feel like we have a guy we can play that game with Jalen." So he's kind of acknowledging that, like, look, we don't want to play that way all the time, but we absolutely know it has to be in our bag depending on the situation. And I thought they have rode those situations in a really smart and impressive way compared to years past where it felt like it was more of a like, go bail us out because we don't have anything else. Instead, they're identifying the matchups and saying, we're not doing this because we have to. We're doing this because this is currently the best option for what we're seeing from the defense. So credit to him there. And Brunson's usage by year, 2024, he was first in the playoffs in usage at 36.4%. In 2025, he was 33% and 34% in the series they lost. So those are really high numbers. This series, only 28%. He's 30.5% for the playoffs, which doesn't sound like a huge discrepancy, but it really does. Like once you get right around that 30 mark, it becomes kind of like a, wow, we're getting into the heliocentric space. And so to have him only a little bit above that, whereas he was like comfortably above that, is a pretty distinguishing thing for them because historically they've just completely rode him. And now, like I said, I mean, he's going to have high usage anyway because he's the point guard, he's the leading scorer, but it's how he's getting that usage, I think, also is relevant to this context and is a huge factor for why they have been playing so well as they have. Another thing that I want to credit Mike Brown for has completely unleashing Karl Anthony Towns as a playmaker. In this postseason, he's averaging 5.9 assists per game versus 2.6 turnovers. In his playoff career coming into this year, he was only 2 assists per game and 2.5 turnovers per game. So he had a negative assist to turnover ratio. Last year, he was even worse here, 1.3 assists per game and 2.2 turnovers. So they have totally shifted their strategy in the half court and are empowering Cat to sort of be the offensive hub in the high post at the top of the key. And I feel like this role has sort of unlocked the best version of what we've seen out of Cat. Like he's in the past, obviously been a polarizing postseason player, but a lot of that has to do with him forcing the issue, dumb turnovers, dumb fouls, offensive fouls, just kind of deciding, hey, you know what? I'm taking a shot in a while. It's Cat time. And he's not really doing that because he's shooting the ball less and his scoring's down, but he's still hyper involved in what they're doing offensively. And I actually also think it's bringing out a better version of him defensively as well. So he's always been a capable passer, but it just hasn't really been his role depending on the teams he's been on. So I love the fact that this is twofold, getting the ball out of Brunson's hands a little bit more, so because he's a pretty good off-ball player and still can be, and then having Cat be more of that facilitator, just something that Tibbs really never even experimented with in the past. And Mike Brown has been totally unleashing that version of Cat. Another thing, his ability to actually develop a real rotation. In 2024 with Tibbs, they had 4 guys playing 36 or more minutes per game, 2 guys playing 40 plus minutes per game. They had a 7-man rotation. It was basically the starters plus Precious Achiuwa and Miles McBride. And then once OG went down, they had Alec Burks in there. 2025, they had 5 guys playing 36 plus minutes per game. Only a 7-man rotation. It was the starters plus Mitchell Robinson and Miles McBride. And then 2026, this year, they only have 1 guy playing 35 or more minutes per game, and it's Brunson at 36, which is totally fine and reasonable for your best guy. They're going a legit 9 to 10 guys deep in this one, 9 guys with 12 plus minutes per game. They're playing their starters, obviously, with Robinson, McBride, Shamet, Clarkson, Alvarado. Like, they're at least giving those guys a chance. And look what has happened for a guy like Landry Shamet when he's gotten the opportunity. Like, they're not having to rely on those guys, but like those guys can make a difference. And having role players that can win you games, like the only way to have those scenarios is to like have belief in them and give them opportunities. And if you don't do that throughout the span of the postseason, when you actually need them to do something, that confidence isn't going to be there. I also think Brown has been just generally making adjustments and remaining flexible. Like game 1, they benched Josh Hart down the stretch, which was the absolute right move. They needed to do that. He didn't have it. Like, they were playing much better without him, but he didn't overreact and completely abandon him after that game 1. He could have easily benched Hart in game 2 and been like, all right, Josh, like, we're going to try to stagger your minutes so it's a more advantageous matchup, etc. But no, went right back to his guy in game 2, and he like won them the game in that one and totally flipped the series, and like it just had Cleveland rethinking that strategy defensively. And so just the ability to kind of read the game and decide what he wants to do based on that. Again, Tibbs just was not doing that last year, and Atkinson certainly wasn't doing it this series either. And I mean, a perfect example of the discrepancy between these 2 guys in the series was the hack-a-Mitch that they were doing, where New York wasn't even in the bonus yet, and Kenny Atkinson had them fouling Mitchell Robinson. As soon as they were 1 foul away from the bonus, they would sub him out. So he's just putting them in the bonus willingly, never even got Robinson to the line. So that is sort of the chess checkers matchup that was going on here. And for Atkinson on the other side, I thought he made absolutely 0 adjustments. You know, Brunson getting 1-on-1 in the comeback in game 1. Like, people are going to make fun of James Harden for that. That's not a James Harden issue. Asking any starting guard, especially a 36-year-old one, to guard Jalen Brunson in the isolation on 10 straight possessions, pretty much anybody else would have the same result. Like, that is not a James Harden unique or specific issue. Like, the issue is that Atkinson didn't have them react at all. They didn't have them either try to fight through the screens to prevent the switch. They just willingly gave him the switch. They didn't blitz at all. They didn't send 2 at him and cheat off some of the role guys. Like OG Anunoby was pretty cold and quiet in game 1. Like, that's a guy you might want to force to, like, let's see him make a shot, and then maybe we'll second guess cheating off you. So that was just one example of him completely not being able to adjust and just living and dying with what he was seeing out there. Not calling timeouts during that game 1, and throughout different runs in the series, he had quotes like, I really like to hold on to my timeouts. Like, I get it, but there's a time and a place where you just got to try to regain the momentum. And they just, again, he kind of just left his guys out there dry. And he just couldn't get any fight out of these guys. And the worst part is I felt like there was no accountability. The whole analytically we're up 2-1 thing, that is a joke. That's a joke. That's like, he's been made a meme, and rightfully so. Like, I'm sure he didn't think that was going to happen, but I'm like, dude, come on. You cannot say that. You're down 3-0 in the conference finals in a series that people thought was going to be pretty competitive. Like, you have some pride and just have accountability. That's the thing, is like, he's saying, well, we don't need to do anything differently. Like, analytically, like, we're getting good shots and we should be winning these games. The shots just aren't falling, which are out of our control, is basically what he was getting at. And I'm like, how about you actually own up to some mistakes that you made and talk about adjustments that you might implement and say, like, hey, like, we didn't play well enough and that's on me, instead of going that route. So I thought that was pretty weak. And, he blamed the 7-game series from the schedule from the previous series as well. Like, we probably would have won game 1 if we weren't coming off back-to-back game 7s. And I'm like, well, whose fault is it that you had back-to-back game 7s? You did it to yourself. You didn't take care of business against 2 clearly inferior teams that are way less talented than you. So zero pity for me on that one again. And just to even say that stuff out loud, I'm like, it's your own fault that you were in that scenario. But for the Knicks overall, they are playing with such a level of connectivity and togetherness that is so impressive. Like, they honestly look like a 2014 Spurs level type team where they're just making every right pass. Everyone's making the right read. Everyone knows where the guys are supposed to be. Everyone's in the right spots. They're playing like a collective unit. They're crisp. Their passes and rotations are intentional and they're in the right spots. And in Cleveland, on the other hand, they look disjointed. It's clunky. Your turn, my turn. They are a collection of talented players. But they've been sloppy with the ball, like I mentioned. They're kind of just rolling the ball out there without a purpose or a plan. And when things aren't going their way, they don't have any tangible pivots that they've shown that they can go to or have even tried to go to be honest with you. So this Knicks team right now is the idealized version of what people thought they could be. It has truly come to fruition what this front office envisioned when they made all of these moves. You've got Brunson running the show, not being overly ball dominant, enough support to hide him defensively, and he's been just genuinely awesome on offense for 4 years in a row in the playoffs. 29 points per game over that span, 7 assists, 46% from the field across 56 games now. I mean, that is a ridiculously large sample to be scoring at that rate, and he's just proven to be one of the biggest offensive playoff risers that we have in the league. Karl-Anthony Towns, I can't say enough good things about him either. I really think him and what Mike Brown's unlocked in him has been the number one biggest reason for the Knicks looking as good as they have and playing as well as they have. Because Cat, like, the upside that he's shown in this is just something Julius Randle, for example, could never bring to this team. And he is a walking mismatch. He is finally accepting of that number 2 role, but he's simultaneously more involved, but also less involved offensively because they've got him with the ball in his hands, sort of running the offense through him, but not necessarily generating as much shots for himself. I think he's been as engaged defensively as I've ever seen him, especially in the postseason. He is minimizing the boneheaded plays like he never has before. And I think he's playing just the best all-around basketball of his career. In this postseason, 17 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, 57% from the field, 49% from 3, solid defense across the board. His advanced stats have been like on a level that would put him in line with like the best player of all time, but obviously smaller sample, but 71% true shooting for a guy that is a volume 3-point shooter. His win shares, he leads all of the playoffs in win shares so far in the postseason at 3.0, which, he's only played in 14 games. Wemby's played in 17 now. Shea's played in 16. So less sample, but still having more of an impact by those numbers. And then the 2 wings, OG and Mikal, like when they traded for those guys, it was for this exact kind of run, being dominant defensively. OG's taking on the bigger wing, sometimes big man down low as well, sort of a cross match. They've got Mikal as the point of attack defender, and they brought these guys in to cover up for Cat and Brunson on deep because those guys have been liabilities in the past, but they're also playing their perfect complementary offensive roles. OG has been spectacular offensively in this postseason, 20 points per game, 7 rebounds, 58% from the field, 48% from 3. Mikal got off to a very, very slow start, I'll say, in the postseason. In his first 5 games, only 7 points, 1 rebound, 1 assist, 44% from the field, 27% from 3. And there were some real questions about that trade, but he's been awesome since then. 19, 4, and 3 on 63% from the field. He had a stretch over this postseason where he was 67 for his last 97, which is 69% from the field shooting. That was before he went 4 for 16 in game 4 of this series. But regardless, that's a huge sample, shooting at a ridiculous level of efficiency. And they've got optionality on this team. They can play Josh Hart as for more switchability and defense on the wing and a little bit more shooting. Or they can go with Mitchell Robinson as the fifth guy and have him out there for size and rim protection and put Cat, slide him over to the 4. And even on their bench, they have more options. Miles McBride as the spark plug scorer allows them to play more 5-out lineups. Same with Shamet, who's been a legitimate 3-and-D guy for them. He literally went 11 for 12 from 3 in this series, which is like not even real. I've never seen anything like that, to be honest with you. And then Alvarado and Clarkson are more energy guys, but depending on the game, one of them could be relevant. Alvarado a little bit more for defense, Clarkson a little bit more for offensive creation. But yeah, this Knicks team, there's not much bad to say about what we've seen out of them. All of the flaws of their past have just not been a factor in this postseason. And of course, they haven't played nearly the kind of competition that they will in the finals, but it's hard not to feel really good about where they're at. And they absolutely dominated this series. They've absolutely dominated every series they've played so far, and they've been just dominant this entire postseason. Then we will move to the Cavs. And their top players just did not show up in this series, which sadly has been quite a recurring theme for them over this era of Cleveland basketball in the postseason. James Harden, 39% from the field in this series, 5 for 28 from 3. That is 18%. 5+ turnovers in 3 of the 4 games. He had 12 assists to 17 turnovers in this series. 12 assists for Harden in 4 games is just not going to get it done. The 17 turnovers is not great, but I can live with that maybe if he's averaging 7-8 assists per game, but he also wasn't doing any playmaking. So, just from that perspective, terrible series for him. Didn't score 20+ one single time. More turnovers than field goals made in 2 of the 4 games, which is kind of turned into sort of the Harden special in this postseason games. And in the elimination game specifically, 2 for 8 with 5 turnovers. And Harden just can't be counted on in the postseason. And this is not new information. We've kind of known this. If he is a guy that you are riding or dying with and you can't win games where he doesn't play well, then your team's just not very good in the playoffs. They're just not going to go very far, and they're not going to win many games. So, again, I'm not going to absolutely destroy Harden for the defensive thing. I think that was more of a coaching mistake, but offensively just looked like the worst version of Harden. And I'll give him some credit. Like, I don't think they get to this point in the conference finals without that trade. I don't think they get here without him having some really big games in the previous series. But yeah, it was not a good showing for him. And when they made the move, all the skeptics that were like, Harden's going to be the guy to get you over the top, they proved to be right. And I think the book is just kind of written on him. And do I think there's a scenario where he could be a contributor on a legitimate contender? Sure. But it has to be in a lesser usage role than what he is on this team. Donovan Mitchell. The stats are going to look okay, counting-wise, but 2.3 assists per game. 9 assists to 14 turnovers in this series. And this was an issue for him all postseason. And it's becoming an issue for him as a recurring thing where he is just too poor of a playmaker for his level of usage. If you're going to be a ball-dominant, high-usage guard, you have to be a high-level playmaker. You just do in the NBA today. And he's just a tick below where he needs to be, maybe even multiple ticks below where he needs to be there. He defaults to tunnel vision too much. He has like the worst version of like Westbrookian tendencies that make him just fall into a brand of basketball that's not fun to watch because he's just chucking shots up and not getting guys involved, etc. So he also just disappeared in the one close game in game 1. He was having a spectacular game in that game and just went totally quiet down the stretch. And maybe if he takes a few more shots or gets guys more involved, then they win that game. And this is a whole different discussion. But yeah, this was a pretty disappointing postseason run for Mitchell across the board. Again, the stats are going to look good and the scoring is going to be just fine. The efficiency wasn't terrible. But to me, if you're Donovan Mitchell, you can't have 9 assists in 4 games. You can't have more turnovers than assists in this series like that. It's just not acceptable for a guy that's supposed to be a top 15 guy in the league. Evan Mobley scored over 15 points only one time in this series. He was 6 for 21 from 3. That's 29% and was 31% overall on the season. His points per game and rebounds per game have gone down in the playoffs for the 3rd time in 4 years, despite his minutes going up every single year. And at this point, just like we talked about with Chet, just like we've talked about with Jalen Duren, he just isn't good enough offensively. And for the type of reputation he has, for the accolades he's received as an All NBA guy last year, an All Star last year, for the salary that he is going to get with his extension kicking in. Like, he just has to be better on that end of the floor. He he can't shoot. He's advertised as a floor spacing big that barely spaces the floor. Teams don't respect him. He doesn't make them pay nearly enough. Can't do anything off the dribble. Just zero level of self creation in a way that's productive offensively. Not really much of a post scorer either, because he's a little frail, and that's just not really what this team asked him to do anyway, because they've got Jared Allen down there. So he's kind of clogging the paint for him a lot of the time. So again, he's ultimately probably more of just a superstar role player, but this, again, a guy that people were sending into top 15 player in the league, or at the very least top 20. Like, people have compared him to Kevin Garnett, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Anthony Davis. Like, he's not sniffing the level of those guys, and we're heading into year 6 now. Like, I don't think that we're ever going to see that out of him. And I think we need to recalibrate a little bit on expectations for what Mobley is as a player, even though he is still a very, very good defensive player. But again, even on that end, like, he won a defensive player of the year, but he doesn't impose his will there. It feels like he can block some shots. He's versatile, but it's not like he's anchoring this elite defense as like the guy running the show there. So I don't know. Mobley continues to kind of disappoint me in the playoffs. He did have some decent moments, but you can't let him get away with it when people are talking about this guy the way they were. And then Jared Allen just turns into an inconsistent role player every year in the playoffs. This guy that's been an all-star in the past, he's gotten defensive player of the year votes before, but 11.5 points a game, 6.8 rebounds is just not enough from a guy of that stature. None of this helps by the fact that the role guys were just awful for this team in this series. Max Strus was 8 for 25 from 3. That's 32% from deep. Sam Merrill, 6 for 21 from 3. That's 29%. Dennis Schroeder, 4 for 15 from the field overall. That is 27%. Jalen Tyson, 0 for 8 from 3. Did not make a three-pointer, 25% from the field. Dean Wade, only one with a respectable percentage at 40% from 3, but he only made 4 total threes. He only had 10 total shots in the series. So the volume was so low that it doesn't really matter that he made a couple shots there. And I already talked about the disaster that was Kenny Atkinson. I think he was genuinely very, very bad in this series across the board. But in summary, with Cleveland, they have a lot of talent. I think that their top 4 guys, I think Mitchell is a clear-cut All-NBA level player. I think Harden is still an All-Star level player, and depending on the year, could even sniff All-NBA. He made it last year. Mobley, I think, is a still fringe All-Star guy. Like, I do think what he brings defensively is very invaluable, and he can do some stuff offensively, but it's just no consistency to it. And then Jared Allen is a very solid big man. Like, that's a really nice core 4. But the problem is, it's a lot of guys that can be good, and I think are winning players for the most part, but they just need the right supporting cast to cover up the flaws and complement them more. I don't think this group complements each other much at all. I feel like they have advantage creation, but then the decision making and the execution off of that advantage creation sucks, and they just don't. Something about this group just doesn't mold well together. And so going back to, like, can Mitchell be the best guy in a contender? I think he can. Like, that's not the issue I'm diagnosing as like, oh, well, Mitchell just can't be your best guy. Like, I think he can, but huge caveat that you need a team that's really tailored to him. You need bigger wings that can cover up defensively on the wing. You need, big men that can space the floor and open things up for him driving to the lane. You need another more maybe pass first defensive guy in the backcourt next to him, but they just don't have any of those things. And so this is not the right group for him. I'm not saying he can't do that. Like, could he be in the Brunson spot on this Knicks team? Probably. You put him on San Antonio in the Fox spot, would they still be in the finals? Yeah, probably. But this group is just not the right group for him. And same thing with Mobley. It's like, can he be a top guy in a contender? Probably, yeah. But he needs to be basically an overqualified role player, not an underqualified featured offensive player, which is kind of what they're asking him to be, because when Harden or Mitchell doesn't have it, that's who they look to, and he just doesn't have answers there. So again, I think the guys on the team are good and they're talented and they can be winning players, but the combination of them all together, like there's too many flaws that don't have complementary pieces around them to cover them up, which is like a great example of what the Knicks did well is Cat and Brunson, two flawed players, but then you get OG and you get Mikal Bridges and you have the optionality with Hart and Mitchell Robinson to play next to Cat if you need, or behind Cat. Like they have all these other guys that cover up what those guys don't do well. And this Cleveland team, they just don't have that. And aside from that, it kind of just feels like the general fabric of this core, it doesn't work. It's built on two stars that are wildly inconsistent, and you don't know what you're getting game to game. And those guys often rely too much on isolation, jump shot shooting, mismatch hunting, and not enough togetherness and actually sharing the ball and generating good looks for the rest of the team. They've got two bigs that don't play very big most of the time and aren't super physical, and a bunch of role guys that either shoot but don't defend or defend but can't shoot. So they've got positional redundancies. They haven't had a single wing that you can trust since LeBron James left the team in 2018. And on top of that, just no general togetherness, no cohesion. They skated by on talent in the first two rounds. They beat a team with RJ Barrett as their second option. They beat a team with Tobias Harris as their second option. And they should not feel super confident because of that. Like that's not, they made the conference finals, but to like, sometimes the result is less important than the context of the journey getting there. And so Cleveland, to me, does really need to make some changes. I know we've kind of said this the past couple off seasons when they get bounced in the postseason, and they did make a change. They traded Garland for Harden during the season at the trade deadline. But I don't see a world where Harden, Mitchell, Mobley, and Allen can all be on the roster next season. I think you have to switch something up there, and they either need to break up the guards or break up the bigs, or arguably break up both, just to try something else and try to, diversify the personnel a little bit more and get guys that fit better, not only positionally, but also playing style wise, and can help cover up some of the flaws of the guys that do decide to stick around. And the Harden trade complicates things because they kind of have no choice but to continue to double down on like win now stuff. Because that Harden move, it played their hand. There was a scenario where this same kind of result happened and they decide to pivot, trade Mitchell and build around like Mobley and Garland, try to retool, get a little bit younger. But you can't really do that now because you no longer have Darius Garland on the team. And I'm not typically a guy that's like thinking you should make a bad move to try to cover up another bad move you made. But it's just, if you did move Harden or you went younger and traded Mitchell, it just makes that Garland trade look so much worse in retrospect. And I already didn't like it at the time, but I understood it, the thought process. But you can't do that and then 4 months later decide to pivot. Oh no, now we're going to go young and retool. It's just, that's the kind of stuff that gets you fired, in my opinion. And they don't have a ton of flexibility. They have the 29th overall pick. They can trade 2 picks after the draft, first round, and 1 pick before. But they are already a second apron team. So they're like pretty locked in to a very expensive roster. So wheeling and dealing might get a little difficult. They may try to, regardless of what they do, get under the second apron. I would imagine that would be a goal for theirs, but we'll see how they get there. And since I think they should probably move one of those 4 guys, we'll just go through the options here of what makes most sense and who should be moved. Because Harden has a $42 million player option, probably opts out of it and is looking for, they reported like a 2 to 3 year deal in the $30 million a year range. With him, they're kind of trapped because, like I mentioned, the Garland deal, if you let him go or you trade him for not much, after he picks up the player option, like it becomes a disaster. And it's already kind of a disaster, in my opinion, just because like they would have so many more outs if they had not made that deal. And even if they did want to move off Harden, who's the team? Like, there's been reports that he wants to go to Houston. I'm like, it sounds like they do not want him, even though he's the team that makes maybe the most sense for them. But Minnesota, like I don't know. Like I don't really see any fit that makes sense to me. And does he have any real value anyways? If we're being totally honest, like I don't know what they could get for him, and they're kind of just committed to him after that deal. And so he's probably not an option. And even if you did move him, I don't think you're getting anything back that's going to be pushing you over the top. Donovan Mitchell is the next question here. He's making $50 million next season. It's essentially an expiring contract because he has a $53 million player option after that. I assume he would decline and try to sign an extension or something like that. And I'll say this: if they still had Garland and did not make the Harden trade, I could see them moving off Mitchell and riding with a Garland Mobley core, like I alluded to. Like that would make sense as a pivot to me. And they'd still be a good competitive team, probably still a playoff team. They could add other younger guys around them there. But they're pot committed to winning now after that Harden deal. Like they're in too deep. They have no choice. They have to continue to go for it based on that deal. And I do not see the point in trading Mitchell given their win now moves. Like it would make no sense for them to trade for Harden and then trade away Mitchell. Like picking Harden over Mitchell just based on the age and who, like, Mitchell's just a better player also. Like it wouldn't make any sense, and you're not getting better. You're not getting more win now moves by giving away Mitchell. So it doesn't make sense to me, honestly, to try to move him. But I say that to say that you do risk losing him for nothing if he doesn't sign the extension this offseason. So I think that value is going to decline. He's going to probably want 70 million plus on his next deal, and he's aging, or soon to be early 30s small guard. Looked a little like he didn't have the same burst in the postseason, but people speculate he might have been a little banged up. But regardless, so I don't know. I think they probably hold on to Mitchell. That one doesn't make as much sense to me. Jared Allen, he has 3 years left at 28 million, 30 million, 32 million. A little pricey, but still palatable. I think his contract is movable, but would return probably the least among these guys. So again, it's like I'm not sure anything coming back would move the needle. Maybe you attach those 2 picks to him. But even if you trade him, then you probably still need to go get a center because Mobley can do it in spurts, but he has just proven that he probably shouldn't be doing that full time. So maybe Allen, and then you attach the picks, and you could get somebody like, does that get you a Trey Murphy? But then again, it's like, does that move the needle? I don't know. So I don't know if Allen has enough value to really get you something that's going to put you legitimately over the top, which is where Mobley kind of comes in as he's probably the only real one here that makes sense for them, notably moving the needle to like become a true contender. Not to mention that I would not hate to get off that contract. He's owed 50 million, 54 million, 58 million, 61 million the next 4 years. And in my opinion, he's just not a max player. Like he's a very good player, but he is a overqualified superstar role player, which again, very useful, very good player. But that's a lot of money with the cap restrictions we have today to be paying a guy that can't use his dribble to get you a reliable shot consistently. You obviously, at his age, probably only move him if it's like a true needle mover. So is that move even out there? I don't know. Giannis is the one that's been floated. And I think normally I would say I don't know about that deal for them. But it kind of feels like the only swing they have available for the ceiling they want. Like they're basically pot committed on trying to win now. You have to try to win now. And you have to get somebody that's going to make you noticeably better than you are right now. Like they are not like one kind of other pretty good role player away. Like they got their ass kicked this year, and Boston's probably going to improve. Indiana's going to be back. Like other teams are ascending in the East. The Knicks are not going anywhere next year. Like they've got work to do. And even if they had beaten the Knicks, they would have probably got absolutely smacked by the Spurs or the Thunder if they had made it. So they're far away. So they need to go big fish hunting. And so Giannis really feels like the only option for them. So I would strongly consider it. Like, is it risky? Yes. But I do not see another needle mover out there. So if that's your objective is to get a true needle mover, it feels like Giannis has to be the guy. Does it shorten your window? Sure. But they already did that when they traded Garland for Harden. Like they are pot committed on that move now. And so you kind of have to double down or the deal continues to just make zero sense. So we'll see what they end up doing. But yeah, Cleveland, if they try to run it back with the same 4 guys, I will put on the record here, I will never, ever pick them to beat any legitimate team in the Eastern Conference. Like I barely consider Detroit legitimate, with Tobias Harris as a second option. Like, they to me are just completely non-serious. I will not be taking them seriously in any capacity as anything more than a team that could win close to 50 games, maybe win a series, and then get bounced by a true contender once they actually do face one. So it's tough. And it was an ugly out, but that they kind of put themselves in this position with that Harden trade, which I said at the time I did not like, and continues to look kind of way worse in my opinion. Okay, I'm going to wrap up real quick with the lottery reform that was passed last week, the new rules, the 3-2-1 system, just to walk you through what that entails. There's 16 teams that'll be in the lottery now, as opposed to 14 teams in the past. The 14 that missed the playoffs, it'll be those 14 still, plus the 2 7-8 game losers in the play-in. So basically, the top 7 teams in each conference, once the play-in is through, will not be in the lottery, and the 8 seed and below, rather than the 9 seed and below, will be in the lottery. In terms of the distribution of ping pong balls, it's by reverse record for this. So teams 1 through 3 with the 3 worst records get only 2 balls, and that is considered the relegation zone to try to prevent teams from wanting to be a bottom 3 team in the league. They actually get less ping pong balls than some other teams in the lottery. Teams 4 through 10 get 3 ping pong balls. That is basically the non-relegation zone, non-play-in teams. And then teams 11 through 16 get 1 ping pong ball. So that'll be the 8 seed, the 9 seed, and the 10 seed after the play-in is played will get 1 ping pong ball there. So we could actually see a team who makes the playoff win the lottery, which is a little crazy because we've had 8 seeds go to the finals. Not like Miami in 2023 under these rules could have made the finals and then also got the number 1 pick, which is pretty crazy to think about. There are some year-over-year restrictions where you cannot have the number 1 pick in back-to-back seasons. My understanding of it is if you were drawn for number 1 and you were ineligible, you would just get the second pick, but I don't totally quote me on that. They're retroactively starting this restriction for this season. So the Wizards are now not eligible for the number 1 pick next year. Cannot have a top 5 pick in 3 straight years, which if drawn top 5, I think you just go to 6. Like I said, don't quote me on that. But retroactively starts for last year's draft. So there's only one team that was top 5 last year and this year. That's the Jazz. So their pick for next season is not eligible to be in the top 5. I will get to more of that later. The second round, picks 1 through 16, so overall picks 31 through 46, will actually be done in reverse order of what the lottery results are. So if you had the first pick, you actually get the 46th in the second round. Second gets the 45th, so on and so forth, where the 15th pick gets the 32nd and the 16th gets the 31st. So if you get unlucky in the lottery, you then are getting kind of lucky in the second round. I don't really know why they did that, to be honest with you, but it's at least a little interesting. So this will take place starting next year in 2027, and we'll go through at least 2029, sort of a trial phase, so they don't have to do it long term, but they're at least trying it out to see how the teams in the league respond. So additionally, Adam Silver reportedly has the right to fine up to $10 million to teams. He can adjust the odds for teams based on if he thinks they're tanking. He can just change the order of the draft at his discretion and can force even a forfeit of a pick. And the last piece of this is that they're going to televise it, but that's less important. So overall, I don't mind this. I have a few qualms. These are my only things that I think that were either unnecessary or they could have done differently, in my opinion. I think, one, they should have waited 2 to 3 years before they implement this, because I know they want to get rid of the tanking immediately and they're doing the trial phase, but there's too many previous transactions that were made without knowledge of this being in place that probably would not have been made. Most notably, the Memphis Grizzlies are getting absolutely screwed over by this because they traded Jaren Jackson Jr. to the Jazz for multiple picks, but one of them included their 2027 unprotected first round pick, so next year's draft, which, as I said, is ineligible to be in the top 5 because the Jazz pick has been in the top 5 the past 2 years. So would Memphis have made this deal had they known this? Probably not. I'm sure that unprotected Jazz pick next year was a huge, huge, huge driving force, like the asset they wanted in the deal for this, because they didn't really get a lot of players of note back in this. It was really a picks forward deal. So that is unfortunate, not to mention that it's kind of strange that they're tying that restriction to the original owner of the pick and not the team that currently has it. Like, why wouldn't why wouldn't the league be like, yeah, Utah had a top 5 pick the last 2 years, but now this is Memphis' pick. So Memphis does not have that restriction. So that part of it is pretty strange to me as well. I feel like you should not be punished because another team tanked previously. Like Memphis is getting screwed because Utah tanked, which is just completely against the point of this whole new system, in my opinion. So I don't, that to me is like, I'd be pretty upset if I was a Memphis fan. And to be honest, I kind of think, I don't know if he will do it, but I think Adam Silver should probably step in and be like, we're going to allow this if it happens because it is a little unfair just given the transaction, which is why I would have just waited a couple years. Because then Memphis doesn't make that pick if they know what's happening this year. And it gives teams a couple years to be able to like actually properly evaluate some of these assets a little bit more. Second thing, I think the top 5 being the cutoff feels a little arbitrary and probably too low. Like if you just look at the last 15 fifth overall picks, Ace Bailey, Ron Holland, Oscar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, Jalen Suggs, Isaac Okoro, Darius Garland, Trae Young, De'Aaron Fox, Chris Dunn, Mario Hazonia, Dante Exum, Alex Len, Thomas Robinson, and Jonas Valanciunas. Like, that is not a very impressive group. Like, sure, you had a nice little run there of Garland, Trae, Fox, but other than those 3 guys, I mean, the Pistons just had 3 top 5 picks in a row, and it was Ivy, Oscar, and Holland. Ivy's out of the league now. Holland looks like probably a bust at best, like a hustle role player, and then Oscar, very good player, but very offensively challenged. So, like, trust me, I promise those top 3 guys are not like changing the course of the league. And of course, they probably did this because the Spurs thing that like they ended up with the first pick, then the 4th pick, then the 2nd pick. But the 2nd pick and the 5th pick are very different. Like most drafts kind of have a clear top 3. I feel like 4th is sort of where the consensus usually breaks a bit. But I don't know. I probably would have done top 3 rather than top 5 just because I do kind of feel like top 5 just feels arbitrary and there's no real proof that like getting the 5th pick is some huge advantage. And honestly, moving forward, if my team had decent odds and I got the 5th pick, I'd probably be pissed. I'd rather have the 6th pick than the 5th pick because then I'm at least eligible for top 5 next year. And unless it's like a really strong 5-person draft, then 5th is probably kind of just throwing a dart at that point. So the 2nd round reverse order thing feels a little weird and unnecessary to me too. I don't absolutely hate it that much. I just don't care that much about it, but like it is just strange. I don't really know why they did that. Felt like just for shits and giggles. I don't know. But overall, I do not hate this. I am okay with them trying something different. I do applaud them for that. And I do think taking was a real legitimate issue that they like. I think this will help. Like there probably will be some jockeying still between 10th and 11th, for example, to try to get the 3 ping pong balls versus 1, but that would mean intentionally falling out of the play-in, which is kind of a tough sell to the fans. And I think it's a little bit more shameful for these teams. Plus, not to mention, Silver still said he can punish teams for this. So, like, imagine how bad it'll be if you intentionally fall out of the plan and then also get punished for tanking as a result, and then you get the double whammy. So, like, that is, I don't think it's going to happen a ton. You could also intentionally lose a 7-8 game to try to get a ping pong ball and be the 8 seed rather than the 7 seed. But God, you're playing a risky game there because then you could fall out of the playoffs altogether. And I just don't think teams are going to do that. So I do think there is going to be a real improvement on general tanking just because of that. And we've seen the lengths teams will go to try to get better odds by being worse with their record in years past. So you'd think in theory they would do the same to try to get out of the relegation zone. So it could be kind of cool to see some of these really bad younger teams try to really go for it late in the season, but we'll see like if it makes that much of a difference overall. But I am interested to see a few things play out. Most notably, does this create new problems like teams taking out of the plan or genuinely awful teams just not being able to rebuild? That's kind of the point of the draft, is to give those teams a way to get better. Does this impact trading? Do we see less deals or picks valued higher? It seems like maybe the quality of a pick matters a little bit less, but the quantity of picks is more valuable across the board. So maybe teams try to stack up on individual drafts to try to just stack their odds to try to get the top pick in any specific draft, for example. I also think we just need to be prepared because there could be some weird outcomes. We could have scenarios where the worst team in the league ends up in the 10 to 12 range, which is going to make it really hard for them to rebuild if you don't get lucky. You could see teams end up with the top pick, like the Thunder this year because they had the Clippers pick, the Warriors, the Magic, the Heat. I just talked about the Heat made the finals 3 years ago, and they could have the number 1 pick and have been in the finals. Back just last year, 2025, we had a 48-win team in the 8th seed, so they could get the first overall pick from that. So it's going to be some wonky stuff, but it will be interesting to see how it plays out. Overall, I'd say I'm a 7 out of 10 on it. Like, I feel pretty fine with it, but I do think some of the issues will come to fruition. It just depends how soon we see those. And that's going to do it for this episode of the Sean Jones NBA Show. Thank you so much for listening. We got the NBA Finals kicking off on Wednesday night. I'm going to try to have another pod out before then with my preview of the finals of the Spurs and the Knicks. Talk about the key swing factors, in my opinion, and I will do my formal prediction as well with that podcast. But until then, thank you so much for listening, and I will chat with you soon.